Welcome to this edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I'm Arjun Chaudhary and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत है। प्रतिदिन की तरह कार्यक्रम में हम देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार आप तक लाएंगे और उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए आज कार्यक्रम में आमंत्रित हैं आर्थिक विशेषज्ञ उद्यन जी। स्टूडियो में आपका स्वागत।
धन्यवाद।
और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं अर्जुन चौधरी।
Domestic stock indices close almost flat. Sensex finishes above the 53,150 mark. Nifty settles at 15,850 level. Rupee weakens to 78 rupees and 79 paise against the US dollar. And Brent crude oil prices rise to trade near $117 per barrel.
घरेलू शेयर बाजार बिना किसी उतार चढ़ाव के हुए बंद। सेंसेक्स 53,150 से ऊपर बंद हुआ। निफ्टी 15,850 के स्तर पर पहुंचा। डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपया कमजोर होकर 78 रुपए 79 पैसे के स्तर पर हुआ बंद और ब्रेंट कच्ची तेल की कीमतें $117 प्रति बैरल के आसपास रहीं। सबसे पहले बात शेयर बाजार की। सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी आज बिना किसी उतार चढ़ाव के बंद हुए। सकारात्मक वैश्विक संकेतों के बीच दोनों सूचकांकों में मामूली बढ़त दर्ज हुई। सेंसेक्स 53,150 के ऊपर और निफ्टी 15,850 के स्तर के आसपास बंद हुए। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 0.03% की वृद्धि से 16 अंक बढ़कर 53,177 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 0.11% की बढ़त से 18 अंक ऊपर 15,850 पर पहुंच गया। व्यापक बाजार की बात करें तो बीएसई मिड कैप सूचकांक 0.18% और स्मॉल कैप सूचकांक 0.24% की बढ़त में रहे।
Sensex and Nifty today ended almost flat. Both stock indices added marginally amid positive global cues. Sensex closed above 53,150 points. Nifty ended at 15,850 level. Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange rose 16 points, a 0.03% to finish at 53,177. Nifty at the National Stock Exchange also added 18 points, a 0.11% to settle at 15,850. In the broader market, at the BSE, the mid-cap index gained 0.18% and the small-cap index ended 0.24% up. In the Sensex pack, 17 companies logged gains while 13 logged losses. In the sectoral indices at the Bombay Stock Exchange, all 13 sectors gained while 6 witnessed losses. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was positive as shares of 1,745 companies gained while 1,533 fell. Shares of 137 companies remained unchanged. Let's have a look at how the currency market performed today.
जी, घरेलू मुद्रा के प्रदर्शन पर नजर डालें तो अंतरबैंक विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपया आज 44 पैसे कमजोर होकर 78 रुपए 79 पैसे के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 अन्य प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में 0.27% की गिरावट से 104.22 के स्तर पर कारोबार कर रहा था।
Well, Udayan, what's your take on the market today? There appears to be a pullback, maybe short covering, buying at lower levels, value investing, maybe bottom fishing as well. And looking at the FII, DII data, no surprises, DIIs were the net buyers, but the FIIs were the net sellers to the tune of 1,244 crore rupees. The value has come down substantially. Do you see an overall recovery in the market right now going into the month of July?
Well, Arjun, it's going to remain volatile. So it's like it's like a moody. If the market was to be a human being, then it's like a moody person whose mood is changing every 2 hours. I mean, if you look at how the whole market behaved today, first there was a little bit of an up, and then there was a little bit of downward worry. Then there was this little bit of a spurt that pullback that you talked of. So So depending on this is typically indicative of when market and market participants are not very sure about some information. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there are quite a few things that can determine. So you, in the absence of very tangible and very firm information, you start responding to things whatever you can understand. Now, one of the things which is responsible for the pullback is, of course, relaxation of some restrictions in China, and there's this hope that there will be a little bit of a resurgence in commodity demand. So that's the thought. Whereas the worries that continue to plague us, our markets, are basically high oil prices, and of course globally the worry was about the supply getting disrupted, and there's this new sanctions bit that's coming in. Then there's this whole plan that's being touted about the West coming up with some kind of a plan to cap the oil prices and whatever. So all these things, they oil and things like that, they are like lifelines. So when you are not things as basic as that, when there is an uncertainty, and there will be apprehension, then you have this very, very moody movement of the market. So that's how I would look at it.
जी, उद्यन आपने बाजार के उतार चढ़ाव की बात की. पिछले कुछ समय से जो हम बाजार में गिरावट देख रहे हैं शेयर बाजारों में, उसमें एक बड़ी भूमिका जो बताई जाती है, या बड़ा कह लीजिए कि एक भूमिका कह लें उसको हम, वो विदेशी निवेशकों ने, FIIs ने जिस तरीके से लगातार बाजार से पैसा निकाला है भारतीय घरेलू शेयर बाजारों से, और पिछले 9 महीने में देखें तो करीब 3 लाख करोड़ रुपए की उन्होंने बिकवाली की है. तो और इस बिकवाली के इस दौर में जब FIIs पैसा निकाल रहे थे, तो घरेलू जो निवेशक हैं, DIs, वो बाजार को संभाले हुए थे, वो उसमें निवेश कर रहे थे लगातार. अब जब रिजर्व बैंक जिस तरीके से ब्याज दरें बढ़ा रहा है, तो ऐसे में जाहिर सी बात है कि बैंक के फिक्स डिपॉजिट्स के रेट्स भी बढ़ेंगे. तो ऐसे में घरेलू निवेशक आपको लगता है शेयर बाजार से दूर हो सकते हैं?
देखिए, अभी तक ऐसा नजर नहीं आ रहा है, होल्ड कर रहा है. कई लोगों ने ये अलार्म लगाई थी पिछले 6-7 दिनों में कि ऐसे इंडिकेशंस आ रहे हैं, पर ऐसा पाया नहीं जा रहा है. और जब आप हर नियमित रूप से निवेश करने वाले जो घरेलू निवेशक हैं, चाहे वो म्यूचुअल फंड से हो रहे हो या इंश्योरेंस के द्वारा निवेश हो रहा हो, वहां पे जो है वो एक सर्टेन डिसिप्लिन के साथ जब हो रहा है, वो अभी तक वो टिक रहा है. तो अब आगे चल के कह नहीं सकते, पर जब तक ये है वो एक काउंटर बैलेंस जरूर बनेगा. पर हमारे जो प्रेशर्स हैं, जो दबाव हैं, वो बने रहेंगे और मार्केट में, और उससे हम अछूते नहीं रहेंगे. विदेश में जो मार्केट में जो घटनाएं हो रही है, डेवलपमेंट्स हो रही है, उससे हम अछूते नहीं रहेंगे.
Profitability of our companies are dependent upon how they're able to price their products in a market for consumers to purchase. You have the GST Council meeting which is underway in Chandigarh right now, the 47th meeting right now. How important is this meeting for the pricing of products? It's all ad valorem. Which are the product or the product lines you expect the taxes to go up or down? Likely the decision is going to be announced tomorrow.
Well, Arjun, even if there's a lot of importance that is attached to these rates, but look at it this way: these are episodic. Once you start paying, then that whole impact market will digest it and it will move on. It's like an additional tax or additional, suppose there's a service on which you have to pay 18% tax, then, and there was no tax, so then the whole producers, suppliers of that service or whatever, suppliers of that offering, will do that, and the consumers will absorb it or react accordingly. After that, you move on, so you move on. But, you hit upon something really very interesting. You're saying that the whole capability of passing on the higher input costs or a higher cost because of inflation, that is such an important thing and topic in a program like this, because that's where our listeners when they are actually looking for candidates for investments or staying or investing more, companies who are in leadership positions, who are following the brand equity, shall we say, they are the ones who are likely, the number ones in a branded area, they are the ones who will be able to pass on that higher input. They'll be able to manage these periods of higher inflation far better than people who are just competing on the basis of price. So that's a very important thing that you just mentioned, and it's worth a minute of discussion.
जी, जीएसटी को 30 जून को 5 साल हो रहे हैं और एक बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा रहा है कि क्षतिपूर्ति जो राज्यों को जो कंपनसेशन की बात होती है वो भी अब केवल 5 साल के लिए थी। इस बैठक में जो है इस बात की बहुत उम्मीद है कि क्षतिपूर्ति को लेकर के कुछ नई व्यवस्था सामने आए, या आपको लगता है कि इसी व्यवस्था को ही आगे जारी रखा जाएगा? आप क्या सोचते हैं?
ये तो आपस में बातचीत पे निर्भर है, पर आप सही कह रहे हैं, क्योंकि अभी हम 1-2 साल के एक ऐसी पीरियड से गुजरे हैं जहां पे राज्यों को काफी असर पड़ा है। केंद्र को तो पड़ा ही है, राज्यों को भी पड़ा है, राजस्व को लेकर काफी चैलेंज रहा है। अगर आपकी इकोनॉमिक आर्थिक वृद्धि और आर्थिक एक्टिविटी में इम्पैक्ट होता है तो जाहिर है आपके राजस्व में फर्क तो पड़ेगा। और कुछ ही ऐसे आपको अगर हम याद करें 2020 में कुछ ही ऐसे प्रोडक्ट्स या पदार्थ थे जिसके ऊपर आप टैक्स बढ़ा सकते थे या जहां से राजस्व निकल सकता था। इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी अगर आप उस पर लगाम लगा रहे हैं तो उसके बाद एक केस तो बनता है कि आपस में कुछ कॉम्प्रोमाइज तो बने, और कई राज्य सरकार वो आंकड़े निकाल रहे हैं कि कितनी उनकी क्षति होगी। तो मुझे लगता है एक मिडिल ग्राउंड जरूर होगा और निकाला जाएगा, और ये फिस्कल फेडरलिज्म है। केंद्र सरकार भी इसमें विश्वास रखती है, राज्य सरकार भी करती है।
Well, despite these developments that we are seeing both on the micro and the micro front, the volatility, the VIX India was relatively low, below 22. What do you expect tomorrow, just ahead of the announcement by the GST Council by the Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman? How do you expect the market to react tomorrow? Because today the market in fact went ahead, was positive by 16 points. Do you expect volatility to pick up tomorrow? And you also have the F&O expiry on Thursday, which is just 48 hours away.
Yeah, I would expect this whole, as I was saying, a moody market, mood swinging gyrations to continue. It will not be just GST. As I was saying, that when you are not feeling great, even the smallest things can make things go this way or that way. And it's, Arjun, though, it's worth pointing out that there are lots of good things happening in our country and abroad in terms of numbers. But it's just that the markets have decided that things are not as okay as before, because they were used to a great ride, and that ride is not happening. And because if you look at some of the numbers that we have in terms of actually people going and buying stuff, credit cards getting added, even in the US, even in some other places, I mean, these are all very positive things. And all this talk about economic growth suffering, etc., these are things you're looking ahead. People are thinking far ahead, and maybe we have talked ourselves too much into that not so optimistic kind of space. So when we analyze these things, one has to also keep the part of the cup which is full in mind. So yeah, volatility is going to be there. Our numbers are pretty good. Yes, inflation does impact, but it doesn't impact overnight. This is not, I mean, remember, we're coming from a lockdown where we had to go indoors overnight. We have been through worse. So this is going to be a picnic compared to 2020. So I don't think we should be unnecessarily alarmed. Yes, these things affect, but yes, and because as I was mentioning, when you are not very sure of what the information is, suppose I don't know what the revenue of a company obviously will depend on inputs and so on and so forth. People being able to actually go and work out their customers coming in and spending. If there are going to be too many variables, naturally an investor investor is not going to be too sure. It's going to take a very small information or a headline for him to change things. And that's exactly what's happening. And of course, as you rightly mentioned, that there have been exits by foreign institutional investors. They are large players. But fortunately, unlike what it was, say, about 10 years back, our domestic investors have the muscle and we are doing a counterbalance.
जी, आपने मूडी मार्केट की बात की, वॉलेटिलिटी की बात की और इन्फ्लेशन की भी बात की, तो इस सब पूरे परिदृश्य में, सिनेरियो में हम देखें तो आपको क्या लगता है कि निवेश के नजरिए से कौन से सेक्टर्स अट्रैक्टिव हो सकते हैं अभी भी?
देखिए, इसमें तो बिल्कुल आपको बेसलाइन लेना चाहिए. बेसलाइन ये है कि किसी भी सेक्टर में आप सेक्टर ना ढूंढें, आप इंडिविजुअल कंपनीज को देखें और जहां पे भी आप देख रहे हैं, जब चुनाव कर रहे हैं तो ये देखें कि वो उस कंपनी में जो उसकी जो अर्निंग्स है वो कितनी स्टेबल है, उसकी रेवेन्यूज जो है, प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी है, उसमें बहुत उतार चढ़ाव है. जैसे अर्जुन के साथ अभी चर्चा हो रही थी कि जो मुद्रास्फीति के चलते इनपुट्स के जो दाम खर्चों में वृद्धि हो रही है, उसमें मार्जिन में कितना प्रेशर हो रहा है, क्योंकि आखिरकार आप तो हिस्सेदार हैं कंपनी जब शेयर खरीदते हैं. तो ये एक बात है. दूसरी है फ्री कैश फ्लो. मतलब जब आप प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी की बात कर रहे हैं तो क्या उस कंपनी ने बहुत ज्यादा कर्जे ले रखे हैं, तो फ्री कैश फ्लो कितना है, डिविडेंड दे पाती है नहीं, वो एक प्लस हो जाता है. तो टोटल रिटर्न जैसे कहते हैं, नॉर्मली हमारे कंट्री में हम लोग कैपिटल ग्रोथ इन्वेस्टिंग की तरफ देखते हैं, कैपिटल गेन की तरफ देखते हैं. पर अगर यहाँ पे डिविडेंड भी जुड़ जाता है ऐसे मौके में, तब टोटल रिटर्न जिसे कहते हैं, तो वो शायद बेहतर पैमाना होगा ऐसे मार्केट्स में.
Well, we'll continue our discussion on the market performance with our expert Udayan Ray on Market Mantra. But before that, we'll take a short break, so please stay tuned.
उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का सुलभ और सस्ता माध्यम है आकाशवाणी.
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न केंद्रों से कीजिए अपने उत्पादों और सेवाओं का प्रचार विज्ञापनों के माध्यम से.
लोकल और राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर कीजिए अपने बिजनेस का विस्तार, क्योंकि आकाशवाणी में विज्ञापन बुकिंग हुई बहुत ही आसान.
अब घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे आप कर सकते हैं विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग.
डायल कीजिए 870-001-4242.
नंबर एक बार फिर नोट करें, 870-001-4242.
Welcome back to Market Mantra. We were discussing about today's market performance with the Sensex just going up by 16 points after a relatively high volatile market. Udayan, you're mentioning about return on equity. You're mentioning about how if there is a dividend also attached to the ownership of the stock, then that's an added income for the investor. Looking at the metal index, it went up by 1.67% today after seeing depreciation in its value by almost as much as 30% in the last month. There has been predictions about there being a super cycle in terms of valuation for metal stocks, and of course they've also announced dividends for their shareholders. What is the future? Is the price going to bounce back again?
Well, a lot depends, Arjun, as you all know, on how things are going to pan out in China. Because as we know, it's the factory for the world. Now, if China normal activity gets back on rails, which the optimists think it's going to happen, then you will, and of course, Chinese governments have been giving that assurance that they're going to help. They have every tool in the toolkit to help the economic activity. Then you will find things moving back somewhat. Some of these, there was this whole correction kind of mode that it was setting in that might come back. But I think the picture is going to be somewhere in between, you know. When you put in restrictions, as we have seen in our country and everywhere else, suddenly you cannot kickstart everything and suddenly things don't get back to normal overnight, no matter how much you try. So there will be a little bit of an impact. And a lot of people, some experts actually argue, some of these restrictions that have happened in China and possibly the impact that's going to be there for some more time, is actually equivalent to a recession in the US. They've actually calculated that it's like almost like at a global level, if US were to be in a recession, that is the kind of impact this lockdown in China has already had. So coming back to your question, that this commodity, the way it's going to pan out, pretty much depends on how the factory of the world is going to, respond. Whether the manufacturing is going to come back, and the whole thing is going to move in a way people expect.
जी, रुपए के अगर प्रदर्शन पर हम नजर डालें तो आज 44 पैसे कमजोर हुआ है रुपया डॉलर के मुकाबले. रुपए पर आप इतना दबाव के पीछे क्या वजह देखते हैं और इसका अर्थव्यवस्था पर क्या आप प्रभाव देख पा रहे हैं?
देखिए, सबसे पहले तो तेल की कीमतें और उसके बारे में चिंता. देखिए, केवल मुद्रास्फीति का बढ़ना ही नहीं है, जो दर है, प्राइसेस जो कीमतें बढ़ रही हैं वही नहीं, उसका जो एक्सपेक्टेशन, जो उम्मीद कर रहे हैं, वो भी अब इम्पोर्टेंट हो गया. एक तो पीछे ये जो मुद्रास्फीति के जो आंकड़े हम देखते हैं, ये तो पीछे का हो चुका है. पर सवाल ये है कि हम क्या उम्मीद कर रहे हैं, क्या ये पीक कर गया है, क्या और बढ़ेगा? क्योंकि आप एक्सपेक्टेशन जैसे करेंगे उस हिसाब से आप एडजस्टमेंट भी करते हैं. स्टॉक प्राइसेस में भी यही होता है. अगर आप सोचते हैं कि कंपनी की अर्निंग्स आगे चल के बढ़ेगी तो फिर आप उसको खरीदारी करते हैं, उसमें डिमांड मांग उसकी बढ़ती है स्टॉक की और उसका प्राइस बढ़ता है. मतलब इसको मैं सिंपलिस्टिकली बता रहा हूं. वही इशू यहाँ पे है. तो क्योंकि वो वहां पे दबाव है, इसलिए रुपए के ऊपर जो है वो दबाव का सिचुएशन दिखाई देगा.
जी.
And moving on to more news, Prime Minister Narendra Modi reached Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates this afternoon after attending the G7 summit in Germany. He was received by the President of UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Saeed Al Nahyan. Mr. Modi is holding a bilateral meeting with the President. Earlier in a tweet, Mr. Modi said he had a productive visit to Germany in which he attended the G7 summit, interacted with several world leaders and participated in a memorable community program in Munich. He added that the leaders were able to discuss many issues aimed at furthering the global well-being and prosperity. In more news, inequality of income in India has declined significantly since financial year 2017, says the latest SBI Eco-Rap research report. It also says that the income inequality in the country has also declined during the COVID-19. According to the report authored by Soumya Kanti Ghosh, Group Chief Economic Advisor SBI, India has done quite well during the pandemic in terms of navigating income shocks across the population. The report said India's poverty ratio has also declined to 17.9% in 2020-21 from 21.9% in 2011 to 12. And let's have a look at the Asian markets now.
जी, एशियाई शेयर बाजारों की बात करें तो आज तेजी का रुख रहा एशियाई शेयर बाजारों में. चीन में विदेशी यात्रियों के आगमन पर कोविड प्रतिबंधों में ढील दिए जाने से अर्थव्यवस्था में तेजी आने और मांग में वृद्धि की उम्मीदें बढ़ी हैं. हांगकांग का हैंगसेंग और चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स दोनों आज 0.9% की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुए. दक्षिण कोरिया के कोस्पी में 0.8% की वृद्धि दर्ज हुई. उधर जापान के निकेई में 0.7% की बढ़त रही और सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम सूचकांक 0.1% की मामूली बढ़त के साथ बंद हुआ. यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों की बात करें तो अंतर्देशीय कारोबार में यूरोपीय शेयर बाजार लाभ में चल रहे थे. लंदन के फुट्सी 100 और फ्रांस के कैक में 1.3% का उछाल आया. जर्मनी का डेक्स 1% की बढ़त के साथ कारोबार कर रहा था.
You had just mentioned about the quarantine requirements in China being relaxed right now, not totally lifted, and the story is linked to the demand for commodities. How do you see the government of India easing the quota requirements for export of metals to countries like China in order to contain inflation? Do you see the government now relaxing it, or do you see the government sticking to its stand of not allowing easy exports in order to ensure that inflation is under control?
I think these measures, Arjun, will be they're not going to be long term. The idea is to just give a signaling effect that we are doing something. Sometimes, Arjun, it's very important for say a government or say an RBI or say a SEBI, securities regulator, to give a signal that we are there, we are watching, and also the logic, a guidance in such situations. And so whether it's a restriction on export or a restriction, some kind of a levy on imports or a restriction, these are going to be just tactical moves to, if there's somebody who's misusing the situation to control. So I don't expect these to be a very long-term sort of a phenomenon.
Moving on to the U.S. stock market. U.S. stocks closed lower yesterday as investors remain cautious amid inflation worries and tightening Fed policy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 0.2%, the S&P 500 fell 0.3%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index declined 0.7%. Udayan, both the domestic stock market, Sensex and Nifty, and the U.S. stock indices are moving in tandem. We tend to take cues. If they are in the positive, then our markets also tend to go up. And we've seen that despite experts, some experts saying that the US market will fall further because of inflation concerns, it seems to have been handled right now. The market is in balance once again. What are the reasons? Who is doing the buying?
Well, these are all relief rallies, consolidation, and Arjun, once some of these events go by, market actually digests it, internalizes it, and then starts looking for the cues. So all this commentary, Fed chair making a testimony, etc., they've all been handled. Now every time, say like a G7 kind of meeting happens and some decision happens, anything to do with oil, those are the things that will influence. Otherwise, every time there's going to be a labor report, unemployment, rather employment data coming in, retail sales, those kind of GDP kind of data, those are the things that will keep influencing, because what basically Arjun market is trying to figure out is what is Fed going to do as far as the money supply is concerned. Is it going to raise the rate? What is it going to do the balance sheet? Anything that's giving them more information, they'll respond accordingly.
Well, clearly the rates are going to go up according to even the Powell's announcements to the media. The next question is a recession going to be officially confirmed by the US with 2 quarters coming down? Briefly.
Yeah, in the markets, they are saying that it's a market downturn. But a lot of people are showing now stats. They're saying that the correction is nowhere near some of the historical corrections. So possibly if you're just going by that parameter, there's some more downward plumbing to be done.
Well, let's have a look at the oil market. Global crude oil prices today climbed more than 1%. Crude prices rose following China's decision to ease some quarantine requirements for international arrivals that raised hopes for stronger growth and a revival in demand for commodities. In intraday, Brent crude was trading at $116.75 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were at $110.90 per barrel. How affordable is this pricing of global crude for a country like India?
Absolutely unaffordable. There's no doubt. We need these prices to be around 70, 75. It's not going to happen. And if we can somehow with some luck, if it can come to about 100, it'll be good. If it doesn't, we just have to get smarter in the way we use fuel.
But we also import a bulk of our oil from the United States of America. What would be the rates at which we are buying it from them on the spot market?
I wouldn't be aware of that, but yes, there is Russia that's happening, so that's actually probably bringing the average down to a far more manageable level, I'm sure. But yes, it's a matter of great concern for us.
और अब चलते चलते नजर सोने की कीमतों पर डाल लेते हैं। मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में अगस्त के वायदा कारोबार में सोना आज 275 रुपए की तेजी से 50,925 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर चल रहा था। जुलाई अनुबंध वाली चांदी 525 रुपए की मजबूती से 60,470 रुपए प्रति किलोग्राम के स्तर पर कारोबार कर रही थी और न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना बढ़त के साथ $1,831.80 प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रहा था।
Thank you then for being with us on the program Market Mantra and giving us your valuable expertise on the questions that we put to you.
Thank you, Arjun.
And before we close, a reminder of the headlines. The domestic stock indices close almost flat. Sensex finishes above the 53,150 mark. Nifty settles at 15,850 level. Rupee weakens to 78 rupees and 79 paise against the US dollar. And Brent crude oil prices rise to trade near $117 per barrel. And that's it in this edition of Market Mantra. For now, goodbye.
Namaskar.